Welcome to the Homeschool Mom Chat. I'm Teresa, the certified life coach and graduated homeschool mom here on the Homeschool Life Coach channel or account, and I am so glad you're here. I have put together a little pot of Earl Grey, my daughter's favorite tea. I'm curious what you're drinking. Is it coffee time? The other day I had a cup of coffee at about 5 o'clock and I ended up sleeping for a total of 2 hours the entire night. So this is as much caffeine as I'm going to take in today. Today I'm going to have a conversation with a gal named Trina. Her and her daughter Emily have a podcast called Mind Your Heart. And they declare themselves as the Gilmore Girls, the Rory and I'm going to forget the name, but the characters from the Gilmore Girls, and it sure does feel like it to me too. Mom and daughter, and how they show up in the way they're engaging. And you can hear them on the Homeschool Mama Self-Care Podcast episode today. If we haven't met already, I want you to know that I'm a homeschool mom who wandered cafes with a cup of tea and also museums during school days. That was my normal routine for about 2 decades. And we began our homeschool family routine typically in about September, when we stopped traveling, somewhere at the end of September. And over the years, we learned how to release expectations of what a schooled approach really should be in a home and move into a homeschooled approach that really served our family. And that's what I do now, as well as I help other homeschool moms lean into child-inspired learning so they can also incorporate more of an individualized homeschool approach in their homeschool families. And today we're going to talk specifically, though, more about how we can address some of the big life challenges that we have when life gets lifing as homeschool moms. This past weekend, I spent a solid 3 days chatting with other homeschool moms from mostly around United States and one lovely mom from Canada. Like me, and we were really just chit-chatting about all the things that really matter in our homeschools. And it isn't usually curriculum choice, and it isn't usually a discussion on what the perfect method is for our kids. It usually has to do with figuring out how to do life together, how to manage conflict, or how to address our big emotions, mine and the kids. Maybe dealing with the lack of time that we have for ourselves, feeling compressed by all the activities, feeling imbalanced or frustrated. And certainly, and this was a common conversation point this weekend, also feeling like there's a lot of just life happening as I'm homeschooling. There's too much going on as we're homeschooling. It could be maybe the loss of a family member, or it could be pneumonia. Hi, Michelle. I hope you're feeling better. Or it could be the myriad of possibilities are endless. You fill in the blanks. If you're a human homeschooling, you might have a few challenges. And I have learned there are a variety of things that you can do to address that. And on today's conversation in the Homeschool Mom Chat, hope you've got your tea. I'll take a sip here. I'm going to have a conversation with Trina on how she engaged certain challenges in her family life. So I want to invite Trina to have a conversation with me. Hear where you're from and who you're homeschooling.
Hi.
Hey, nice to see you again.
Nice to see you too.
So I listened to your episode today, and I probably am guessing you didn't listen to my episode. It was a common, thread or raw audio really of our conversation together, because I just got back from a 4-day trip and just posted it. Yeah.
Good for you.
Yeah.
Did you have fun? Where did you go?
Cincinnati, Ohio. I almost said Indiana. But actually, what I understood when I got off the plane, I was so surprised that when I talked to the Uber driver and I said, would you give me an introduction to Cincinnati? And he said, for sure, except that you're in Kentucky. And I went, you're in what? Apparently the Cincinnati airport is in Kentucky, just to confuse me.
Oh yeah, that's confusing. Well, that's
Yeah.
exciting. I did
Yeah.
listen to our episode, but I listened to it on my Emily, our podcast, Mind Your Heart, and I loved it. It
Yeah.
was like, yeah, I was like, it reminded me because in our conversation, I'm like, I heard myself say, I feel like I've met a soulmate. And
Yeah.
I'm like listening, like re-listening to you, I'm like, yes, this is why I felt that way. And I thought, yeah, I loved that. I love that part.
Me too. We just got a little
Yeah.
thumbs up. I don't know if somebody gave that to us or our exuberance is just compelling AI to do something
Yeah.
fancy. So what
Yeah.
resonated with you then?
I really, well, a lot of what you were saying about like trying to balance life and just your approach, even with the kids, your kids, about how that day with the pancakes and like fighting over the spatula and you called it the flipper and that made me laugh for some reason. And and I'm like the spatula. And then about just how like figuring out what works best for your family. And then when you even just a few minutes ago, when you said child inspired learning, I'm like, that is the thing that I love the most. Where I felt like in the school system, because I was in the school system for a long time as a
Yeah.
teacher and then a student sports specialist and a media specialist,
Mm.
I felt like I was fighting that on a regular basis. I'm like, we are not focused on like kids loving to learn and think and providing these opportunities. We're like forcing it.
Yeah.
And so that was just that comment about that was a huge thing for me, just listening to you be honest and vulnerable
Yeah.
about things that didn't go perfectly, didn't
Yeah.
go exactly the way that you planned.
Hmm.
I think that's really inspiring because I don't
Hmm.
think sometimes we admit that women to women. Like this is, we're like,
Hmm.
nope, we got it all together. I'm working or I'm I'm staying at home or I'm whatever and everything's
Yep.
perfect.
Yep.
And it's so not perfect. It's so, we're in the behind the scenes, we're like we're struggling. We're like I'm scared and I don't know what to do and I don't know how to balance all this. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
You
It's
know
yeah.
what? That actually is the reason. I remember Emily, your daughter, asking me about what really shifted things. And when I listen back, as we always do when we're podcasting or interviewing, we listen back and say, oh, I didn't answer her question the way that she was asking it. She was really, if I understand correctly, she was really asking me what shifted for me in my experience in 2004, which was before I was in this crisis moment of homeschooling or this hitting the wall moment in homeschooling. And what shifted for me that actually compelled me to move into a healthier direction. Maybe I'm paraphrasing what she would say, but for me, I've learned that the big earthquakes in life, the moments that are the hardest, the ones that you're like, you don't want to address some big conflict or challenge in your life, but
Mhm.
when let's call it the crap hits the fan, where you're like, you know what, it's too bad and I have to address it,
Yeah.
it's actually a good thing and it doesn't feel like a good thing in the
Yeah.
moment. In fact, it feels like a horrible thing in the moment.
It
and,
does. Yeah.
and it's so uncomfortable because it feels like you've been turned inside out and everybody's watching. And actually in the moment it is hard. Over the course of time it requires you to grow up or accept reality as it is, be honest with yourself, and it's in that moment that everything can change
Yeah.
and you can begin to grow in the way that you really need to and be vulnerable with people.
Absolutely. I agree. I like think so much growth happens in those moments, but
Yeah.
it is hard in the moment. You're like, this is really uncomfortable and I don't want to feel like this and I'm trying to avoid these feelings
Yep.
rather than like I'm going to allow them to come in. I'm going to allow them to sit with them for a second and then figure out what to do from here. Yeah, I think one of the reasons like when I first experienced many different hard things,
Yeah.
but the first like thing that comes to my mind as in the last 10 years, I got divorced and I was like, I really have to figure out how to like live in the uncomfortable sometimes, how to exist, how to be comfortable in the uncomfortable. And so I started doing hot yoga
Mm, sounds uncomfortable.
and yeah, it was a
I've never
very
done it.
uncomfortable. It was super hot. And I'm
Yeah.
like, and it really did help me to like calm down, calm like my nervous system down and like just deal with what was going on. And like I'm not gonna die. I'm not going to pass
Yeah.
out. I can lay down if I need to. It just felt relevant to life.
Yeah.
Like I'm not going to, this isn't the end of
That's
me.
right.
This isn't, the world isn't over. I'm still a mom. I'm still a person. Like I am going to keep going and I'm going to figure out how to be exist in the uncomfortable until it doesn't feel uncomfortable anymore.
That's right.
And
Yeah.
yeah, and one of the things even with yoga was at the end, like after you were like suffering for 90 minutes, it was like the best feeling in the world. Like you left and you felt like rejuvenated. It was such a great afterwards feeling. And so every time you're like, I just got to get to that part. Got to
Yeah.
get to that part. But I'm like, don't rush the process because that's where the change is occurring. And so that felt true for life as well.
It does. It's very consistent with my experience too. And it's, if I had a choice, I said this to Emily on the podcast, that if I had a choice, I would not actually allow my kids to have discomfort or have really hard moments.
Mhm.
I just couldn't. I couldn't do that. And yet I am grateful for the moments that I have had, and I identified that they are also having them at times. And
Mhm.
it doesn't matter that I don't want that for them. They're going to have those experiences. And they might even be at the hands of me.
Yeah.
And something that I've been part of that's actually contributed to their sense of, I don't know, discomfort, let's call it. But I know, you were talking about separation and divorce on the podcast, and I was talking about growing up in a family of domestic violence. And I mean, I could go in so many different directions. So many things became uncomfortable for me growing up in that environment. But there was a certain point in therapy for me where a therapist asked me, what do you do with these really overwhelming feelings in the middle of the night when you, as you say, have these existential crisis, dark moments
Mhm.
in the middle of the night? And I'm like, oh, I like anything. I will get up and I'll take or get a snack, or I'll go for a walk, or I'll watch something, or I'll, all sorts of
Mhm.
different things. And he said, considered feeling them. And I'm like,
Yeah.
heck to the no.
Yeah.
that's not
Yeah.
that's not on the list. And he said, perhaps you should consider feeling them. And when I did, because I went, okay, well, I'll try this, but that sounds like a little nutty, but I'm going to try this. And I moved into a stage of allowing myself to deeply feel the most uncomfortable feelings of my existence,
Mhm. Mhm.
and came to understand that the more that I allowed myself to feel them, the more they dissipated, or the more that I could maybe look at them a little bit more objectively
Yeah.
and get clear what's really going on.
Yeah. No, I love that. And I think that you saying that like it reminds me of like why it's so important also for children,
Mm,
like why it's important for us. I mean, we don't want that to put them in situations where they're struggling or failing or frustrated. But when I first became a media specialist, actually I learned all of this stuff about makerspace, and I was like, this is so cool. Like this has the potential to do so much for kids. But one of the most important things that I learned about creating spaces like that was that we were kind of putting kids in a challenging situation so that they had to feel and figure out how to deal with failure,
mm,
and how failure wasn't the end of the world, and that failure propels us forward. It just shows us that there's one thing that doesn't work, so we've got to make an iteration and do something differently. And that's true for us as adults, but it's also like really true for kids, because the more you practice this kind of thinking, the better you are, the more you're resilient. You're like, okay,
yeah.
I've been uncomfortable before.
Hmm.
I survived it, and so I can be uncomfortable again.
That's right. I'm thinking two things at one time. The one is that I remember, I don't know if it was that therapist or somebody else, because you and I both had this conversation, that if you could have unschooled therapy school, I
Mm-hmm.
probably, like, how many hours do you need to actually be in the therapist chair, or the therapist office, to be able to figure out what they're doing or how they're
Yeah.
approaching? But anyways, I remember someone asking me, so what do you think is going to happen if you feel those feelings? And I'm like, I don't know. I'm going to like blow up into a million pieces, and like I'll
Yeah.
not exist anymore or something. And it turns out I didn't, as you can
Yeah.
see. And then
Yeah.
the other thought is that one of my kids the other day, who's grown up, was telling me that she understands now how the first step to trying to figure out some challenge in her mind in her life is really to build self-awareness practices. And she pretty much said it in those words. And I just went, oh,
Yes.
so easy
Yes. That's like a
to get
parenting
that.
win. Yeah.
I love it. I agree. Totally. That's a celebrating moment. Cue the
Yeah,
confetti because
absolutely.
that right there, I'm like, that's the number one thing. And I don't really understand why. That just by merely looking at something and being honest about that thing and saying it out loud, not necessarily on Instagram for everybody to listen to you,
Yeah.
but just saying it to yourself and your most important people, whatever the challenge is, that right there is that self-awareness. That's step
Yeah.
one in figuring anything.
Yeah, that is so, so important. And what a blessing to like see your own daughter like have that realization. I think their generation, they're a lot better about
Yeah,
this than than mine for
right.
sure.
Yeah.
So I mean because my both of my kids are like their emotional intelligence is so much higher than mine was at their ages. I'm
Mm.
like, and probably now it's probably higher than mine is now, but I'm like, so it's just I don't know, I love to see that as a transformation, as and also we've been better about like publicly saying it's okay
Yeah.
to feel anxious or depressed or all the things. It's not like the worst thing in the world. I don't have to hide you in the attic. And so it's I think that's really helped. But I do think having that self-awareness is important, and feeling like you're a person saying feeling those feelings. Sometimes you're doing all the things to avoid that, like
Yeah.
I'm going to eat or watch TV, or I didn't even realize I just learned this, which this is going to sound so obvious. You're going to be like, how did she not know this?
So I know.
um yeah, well, they were talking about avoiding feelings, and one of the things they said was Netflix. And I'm like,
Yeah.
oh my gosh, I've become such a TV person where I was never a TV. I mean, I'm a massive reader. I love reading, but lately, like for the last couple of years, I've been like just Netflix to death. And I'm like, that's what I'm doing. I'm avoiding, but with Netflix, I'm watching the Gilmore Girls on repeat with Lorelai. When you said that, I was like, it's Lorelai with
Lorelai.
Lorelai and Rory. Yeah. And I'm like, I'm watching it on repeat and I'm watching the same show because
Yeah.
it's comforting. And that is, yeah. So, but I'm like, oh, I'm probably avoiding some feelings I need to deal
Yeah.
with.
It's like a place to feel comfort and enjoy comfort. I know that from experience. That was my way of checking out in my early or my late teens, early 20s. And
Hmm.
I knew that I wasn't really living life. In fact, I had a very caring, direct friend say, I think you need to leave the apartment. Because, to, I'm sure everybody's surprised, I was legit social anxiety. Nobody gave me a diagnosis because I avoided the doctors like the plague if I could. But I was truly anxious
Yeah.
or had social anxiety and depression. And try to ignore it. And so I actually get that. I was doing the deep dive of just TV because there was no
Yeah.
Netflix.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, you're right. I know that wasn't around forever. No, that's interesting. And also it's making me realize, even for myself, that I currently, because I don't have a lot of practice, because I'm working for myself at home,
Yeah.
I don't have to use that muscle as much. I don't have to use that social muscle or that like because I'm like a massive
Yeah.
empath, like I feel everyone's feelings. And so it's hard for me to like set a boundary for myself because I'm not practicing it as much. And then when I am getting ready to be in social situations, I'm getting really anxious. So
Right.
I think you just saying that, I'm thinking about, I'm going to California actually on Friday with my family to see my brother, and I've got so much anxiety. And I'm like, well, that's because I'm going to be around a lot of people and I am not used to that. So I think that's another thing I need to work on.
Yeah. 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 I was just in the airport yesterday and that was a lot of people. There was a lot
Hmm.
of it. As an
Yeah.
empath, that's a lot to absorb for sure. But so what are some of your self-care or self-awareness practices that you use to get a little bit more clarity on some of the things that you're challenged by?
Well, one of the things that I've been doing lately, that because I've been like having a lot of like just around like what's gone on in my country with the election and whatever, and I won't go into that part, but like just all of what's happening all around me feels like
Yes.
heavy, and it feels like it's a lot of things. And so I'm like, one of the first things that I thought of was like, I need to go back to my gratitude journal,
Mm,
because I need to remember the things, I need to look at the things that I'm so thankful for, because when you're in like that mindset, you're in this more of an abundance mindset rather than this scarcity mindset where you're like everything is doom and gloom and the world's going to fall apart and I don't know what I'm going to do.
yeah.
So the gratitude journal, and it sounds almost silly sometimes, it's like, but it's so helpful. It's like I mean, and just recording three things a day. And I just put it in my notes app. I didn't even
Yeah.
like get a fancy gratitude journal, which I actually made a gratitude journal for kids
Mhm.
when I was
Right?
teaching. Yeah. And I was like, this is going to be the a bestseller. People are going to love this because it's so pretty. And of course, it really wasn't. No one's, I mean, no one, everyone's like, whatever. But I'm like, and my kids, my students did it and they loved it. The whole atmosphere in my classroom changed
Yeah.
because we were practicing gratitude every single day. So I think that it makes a huge difference. And it's helped me. What am I on day like eight, eight or
Yeah.
nine? And yeah. And I feel like every night I'm like, oh, I get to write down three things I was thankful for. And it really, I don't know, it's helping me get in a better mindset. That's just one thing. I also like I exercise a lot. Like I do the Peloton and I do weights, and that helps me. And when I don't do that, I can feel the like coming up. And yeah, so
Yeah.
those are just two things.
Yeah. When it comes to the gratitude journal, I actually made one myself for homeschool moms
You
because
did?
I'm
Oh,
a mom of the 1980s, or a woman of the 1980s, and I watched an awful lot of Oprah. And so, do you remember
I love Oprah. Yep.
gratitude thing
Hmm.
came in with her? I think, I'm not that it wasn't in existence before, but she definitely brought it into social awareness. And I agree that there is a perspective shift. Like that's actually, I went into a deeper dive of how to address the hard things on the blog post that's it's attached to our podcast conversation on my website. And if anybody wants to find it, it's well, actually, I'll just leave the link down below. I'll keep it simple. Um, but I've learned a lot of different things to, as you said, build resilience, or how to deal with life when life is lifing, because I've had my own experiences, but also because I was real about it.
Yeah.
And not because I chose that, to be fair. I had to deal with the life experiences because they were too loud, too big, and they were too in my face. So I didn't have a choice but to address them. So that
Mhm.
was step number one. But therapy was like, at the time, I don't know if coaching even existed, but therapy was a really useful tool to have someone guide me to walk through some of the challenges with, hand
Yeah.
holding, because it was really hard for me to look at it honestly and to understand myself on that level, and to feel that vulnerable, or to recognize that I was sharing the deepest things in my soul, which I'm about to share on Instagram, because I know them to be universal now for everybody.
Yeah.
But I also knew that I had to own them, like feeling a deep sense of worthlessness,
Yeah.
feeling a deep sense of I'm not good enough, feeling a deep sense of everybody else is somehow, they've got things figured out. And luckily, when you are vulnerable with people and you talk about this stuff on the regular, you discover you're definitely not alone. This is actually, you're alone if you never have those feelings,
Yeah.
not if you have those feelings.
I totally agree. And I can imagine that you are an incredible life coach, because even on the podcast, I was like, I felt like there was a few times where I'm like, I feel like I'm in a counseling session. Like this feels, I feel some relief. Like I feel like an instant, and also the environment that there's a safety
Yeah.
talking to you where it's like I feel comfortable, like I've known you forever. That's how it feels for me. And but that's another thing that I do have a life coach.
Mm.
I wouldn't say life coach, I would say more like a mindset coach. And
What's
and they I yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
And they really help me like just sometimes just make a little bit of a shift in my perspective, because
Yeah.
I can easily do the same thing that you just said, like that I'm not good enough, or I'm not worthy, or I'm not smart enough. That one comes up a lot for me.
Mm.
And I'm like, okay, you gotta get a grip and like really think about where this is coming from, and like how to shift it, because this is not, let's give you some evidence of things that prove that to be not true.
Right.
This is an activity I actually did with Emily. She's the one that did this with me. I wrote down all the things, all the negative talk that I was having, and then we went through each one and crossed it off and showed the evidence for, like, this is not true. You are not dumb. Here's some 15 things that show that you are in fact are not dumb. And so it was just very, that's really helpful. That's a really, and also cross that physical act of crossing it off is actually really satisfying for me.
Absolutely. When I was first introduced to Byron Katie's four
Mm,
questions, are you
mhm.
familiar with Katie?
Mm-mm-mm.
Well, they didn't actually come from her. When I was introduced to them, it was through Dr. Daniel Amen, who is a psychiatrist, author of Change Your Brain, Change Your Life. And he was
Ah,
brain scan or brain scanner into our community. And so he was offering a free webinar, or no, it wasn't a webinar, it was an in-person seminar. And he had shared these questions that are addressing our automatic negative thoughts. So asking ourselves, what is it that you're believing right now? And I'm sure you're familiar with this. What are you believing right now? Is it true? Or what are your thoughts right now? Is it true? Are you confident that they're 100% true? Is there an alternate way of thinking about it, just as you're sharing? And when you believe something, when you allow yourself to think a certain thing, how does it make you feel? What does it naturally compel you to do? And usually when we have these self-defeating thoughts, we think we're worthless, or we think that we're not smart, then we look at those things and we say, well, if I think that, what does it mean? It means that I won't try to do risky things, won't go on Instagram and talk about this, that's for sure. Or then I won't try to put a podcast together, or I won't try to create a business, or I won't try to do anything risky. I don't want to be seen, heard, or understood by anybody, because I'll just stay low undercover.
yeah,
um, and whereas if you think to yourself, you know, you have some uncertainties and insecurities, but you, like, welcome to humanity. But
mhm,
you are going to do this risky thing. And actually, that is your sign that you are smart and you are capable to doing something. Then you recognize that when you embody certain thoughts, they naturally will play out in a really favorable way.
yeah,
So to me, that this is a life practice. This isn't
yeah.
just a checklist, although I do have a checklist for this. It was the very first thing I offered when I first started coaching. But it was transformative for me too, to say, oh, just because I think something doesn't mean it's true.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like reminding yourself that you said you have a checklist, like reminding yourself that you have these
Yeah,
strategies, that you have these things, these tools in your toolbox to pull out. And sometimes, like, I forget that I have this tool, or
yeah,
I forget about journaling, or I forget about like vision boards, or
yeah,
like these are things that I have done that have been helpful, but they're not at the forefront of my memory. So I don't think about them immediately. But like having a checklist would actually be really helpful, because it's like, okay, let me figure out what thing I can use this time to address these feelings of I feel, less than, or I don't feel capable. Because we're going to have moments of fear. Like,
mhm,
I am my worst version of myself when I'm
yeah,
scared. Like, I will still do it, but I will be, it's just not, it's not a place of abundance. It's definitely scarcity. And I like kind of shut down a little bit. I get angry really easily. And it's definitely something that I have to work through, because fear does not look good on me.
yeah, said everybody. I've actually
Yeah.
learned that um, for myself, and I mean for everybody, when we're in this big emotional space, our prefrontal cortex isn't hanging out with us very well.
Mm,
It's just back, hanging out until the activated part of our brain, the amygdala and all the accoutrements of our brain are like on fire and feeling all these big, huge emotions. And we're just like fight or flight, or fight, flight, fawn, freeze. We're in some form
yeah.
of panic, and we manifest panic differently, but we're not actually using our, the parts of our brain that help us make rational
Yeah.
decisions that actually serve
Yeah.
us. And so, in my experience, sometimes we have to accept the fact when we're having these big moments that we're just having these big moments. Sometimes we really do need someone to come alongside us. Sometimes there might be a finger pointing to something much bigger, and maybe we do need to be under the care of someone,
Hmm.
like medical someone. But at the same
Hmm.
time, every single one of us has these experiences, these big emotional experiences. And sometimes we need to accept that we're feeling the feelings, and it's okay for us to feel the feelings. What are we going to do with it?
Yeah.
We move, into self-soothing techniques is what I've learned. If you need to go hide in the closet and just wrap up in a ball and just
Hmm.
tell yourself, I'm okay, I'm
Yeah.
okay. Or, as I've shared before, in big moments that I've had, learning how to address my own anger, I would go to the mirror and I share a story about how I addressed my anger in my homeschool one day, on the podcast episode with you and I. But other times I share with people to go in front of a mirror, to look at myself and see how I'm feeling. And there's something weird and radical about standing in front of a mirror and
Hmm.
seeing a separate human being. But
Yeah.
now you're not just in your head, you see yourself and you say, oh, I
Yeah.
see why you're frustrated, and I see you're sad or overwhelmed. And then you have a built-in compassion meter for a face, a
Yeah.
human face. And so then you immediately go, okay, I'm not just a bad mom that just got angry. I'm a mom that really doesn't understand what I'm supposed to do here. I feel so confused. How do I deal with this? Or various possibilities. But
Yeah.
yeah,
No, I love that because you give yourself the ability to be kind to yourself
is
because
this
it's yeah, it's so necessary. I think that's a really good idea. I thought of another one when you were saying that. I like the mirror better, but we have these smash rooms. Have you ever heard of this?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Um
I heard they were active last week.
Oh, I'm sure. That was a should have been a place for me to go, actually. It's really helpful though. I went with, I think it was with Emily. I think Emily, yeah, Emily and I did it together
Mhm.
once. And then I took a friend who had been treated so badly at school, like by her administrator. And I'm like, let's go to the smash room. And you write things down on like teacups and whatever, and then you just literally smash
Yeah.
it. And there's like a release, an energy release. It feels so good. You feel crazy because it's like blasting music and you're in these these outfits and you got this thing on, the face shield, and but it is like restorative. You're like, okay, I can let this go, physically let it go, and also mentally let it go, and it just, I don't know, it feels better. I need to do it more often. It's kind of expensive here though.
Well,
Uh,
I don't want you to take my teacup, but
no,
I'm sure you can
yeah,
get
you pay.
them at stores.
Yeah, you pay for all this like bundle of
Yeah.
stuff, and then usually there's like a big thing too, like a TV or something, and you've got crowbars and bats, and yeah, it's a crazy experience. I mean, it's a room that you're just smashing things. So
We had this conversation, or I had this conversation recently, and I don't remember where it was, but it was about breaking the cycle.
Mm.
And this is a common conversation point about various family or people having different backgrounds that they want to break the cycle in. And I believe that, yes, our goal is to break a cycle, but I actually think you can't fully break a cycle. I think that's the point, is that you're just slowing the thing down a bit. Because when we put that kind of pressure on ourselves as homeschool moms, especially in this
Yeah,
space as moms, then there is that feeling of, whew, I don't think I broke the cycle. Like, did I do good enough? Am I doing this mothering thing well enough? And I'm doing a disservice to my kids too. I think our
yeah,
reality is that no one figures out how to do perfect momming. We
yeah,
don't we don't do that. And so then the goal is to choose a self-awareness, or pardon me, a self-growth journey, to actually say, you know what, I'm on a self-growth journey.
yeah,
And if I choose to be on a self-growth journey, now I am going to break a cycle,
yeah.
because now I'm shifting things in a healthier direction.
Yeah, no, I think that makes so much sense because it would feel like a lot of pressure if you felt like you had the pressure of breaking like cycles, especially schooling or cycles that have been going on for hundreds of years. That would feel like any little misstep would make you feel like you failed at
Yeah.
everything. So, we don't want, and again, we want to look at failure as a positive thing. So it's like, okay, that doesn't work. Let me do something else. And so it's just, no, I think that's a really, you were making me think because I was talking to my brother about, I was telling him about, I don't know if Emily and I talked about this, but like she has a serious boyfriend who's just the best. He's the best. And he's like, the plan is to get engaged by the end of the year. And so we're all waiting for that. And it's, very exciting.
Mhm.
And my brother was like, he goes, I think that Emily's going to break the generational
Mm.
curse. And I'm like, yes. At first I was like, yes. And then I go, wait a minute, that's way too much pressure. I'm like, we're not putting that pressure on her. So I'm like, let's just back right off of that because they have a, beautiful relationship and it is very, it's very hopeful. It
Mhm.
brings a lot of hope, but if they, have a hard time or they make a mistake, which we know they will, that's all right. It's not the end of the world.
Yeah,
Yeah.
always something
So
to learn. I'm curious if the people that are listening, if you identify with any of the things that we're talking about, or if there's anything that you have found resonated with you. I'd be curious to hear your perspective because when I say I'm in a homeschool mom chat and I'm inviting you to it, I actually would like to hear your thoughts as well.
for sure. And I don't have a tea, I have
Oh,
water because
yeah.
I'm just a constant water drinker. But and also I'm on this like eating challenge and it's like no coffee or tea for 11 weeks.
Ooh, uh,
Yeah.
clearly on that one.
I'm doing
You are?
well. What am I on, like week?
Yeah.
Yes, I'm on like week. I'm halfway finished, and I haven't had any coffee or tea that whole time, which has been crazy. So the first week was really hard.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
headache and whatnot. I'm just thinking that when we were chatting, I'm just going back to our conversation on the podcast. When we were chatting, you were sharing that, or your daughter actually, Emily, was sharing that the one thing that you really did in a challenging time of your life was to actually ask for help.
Mm,
And I think that's a very similar feeling that we have when we feel like we have to ask for help. We really need help. The same kind of feeling that we have when we haven't done things perfectly in our homes,
mhm,
haven't fully broken the cycle, or in whatever way we feel like we failed somehow. I'm
mhm.
curious, after the conversation, have you had further thoughts on what she shared, or yeah, I'll leave that to you.
I thought that was interesting. I thought it was an interesting takeaway for her because I think sometimes we have no idea the impact that we're having or the things that we think are going to be influential aren't the things that they actually take away.
Right.
So I had no idea that they would take away that I, opened up and was willing to accept help because I guess I didn't even realize how kind of rigid I've been in my life and stubborn, like ridiculously stubborn about I'm not taking help, I'm doing this myself. And like the lesson that teaches them and how that's not helpful because that's a lot of pressure again and it doesn't have to be like that. So hearing her say that that was the thing that she took away was that I asked for help. I was like, wow, because I've always felt like kind of bad about that. Like I, allowed, but I'm like, she's right. It actually, we had miracles
Mhm.
occur because of it, because of being open to, and also I knew there was I knew I needed help. Like I definitely I needed help. It was really tough. I mean, it was leaving in like an emotionally abusive relationship in the first place is a really difficult thing that we often can't do or feel like we can't do. And that's why it is so important to have a community of people that support you and love you and don't make you feel judged or, badly because you do have to ask for help. Um, I couldn't, I feel like I couldn't have survived without those people,
Yeah.
one of which was my
Yeah.
counselor. And having people like that who just really supported me and showed up and loved me, even when I was being difficult. Like there were times that I was being, I mean, really difficult. So yeah,
Mhm.
I think that I'm actually, I like that she noticed it and thought of it as something positive.
Yeah, it is remarkable to me that the things you think you're teaching your kids they're almost irrelevant sometimes because the
Yeah.
things they're really learning are not things that you might even get. And especially when your kids get older, it's a very weird experience where they start
Yeah.
getting to know you better than you know yourself. Yeah.
Yeah. Yes, you're right. And it is, I don't know if we told you in that episode, like I, with my mindset person, she did these videos.
Mm,
Did we tell you this?
I don't
She
understand.
did this video. Yeah, this was like a really cool thing that she did for me after our first, however long our, I can't remember how long our first like time was together. Like it was like weeks of whatever. And then at the conclusion of it, she made these videos for me where she had reached out to like my family members. I mean, this is a little bit of a different circumstance because she knows Emily, like they know each other, but she got video, she got all this information, like she asked these questions and they answered questions about me.
Mm,
And so I have like 11 videos of my family saying things about me in different situations. And it it was like I was shocked. I felt so shocked because another thing that like my son picked up, I this is not something that I thought about, but when I left my teaching, like it was hard to leave teach. It was like almost leaving another abusive
mm.
relationship.
That's
And I look,
okay.
yeah, it felt like it because people, they use the kids against you, but it's for the kids. And that worked on me
Mm,
because I love the kids. And so it was just very hard to walk
yeah,
away and then to take a chance on myself. But my son sees it as like this heroic thing that I did and that I wasn't going to listen to this system anymore and that I was going to, forge my own path and that I was, I persevered and I was brave. And I'm like, really? I had no idea that was the thing that he was going to like think of as such a big deal to him. And I was like, and you sometimes you never get to know that about your kids. You don't have they don't write you long letters or tell you in speeches or create videos where they're telling you, we don't always have that. I felt like I was seeing something that you might see like after you're gone. And
right.
I was like, yeah,
Yeah,
it was
that's
absolutely
beautiful.
beautiful.
Oh, it is.
Yeah.
Actually, my one of my girls did give me a long letter for my 50th birthday, and I still keep
Mm,
a bookmark inside of a book that I read every morning. And it was all about the things that she loved about me. And there's times where I'm like, like that. I first of all didn't know you thought that way,
yeah.
and the second thing is I want to tell everybody, although I'm like I don't know why, but it just feels so heartwarming the things that she shared because I didn't mother perfectly right alongside with the rest of
Yeah.
humanity. And I didn't know the things I needed to know in the moment that I know now.
Yeah.
And I'm sure there's things that I don't know now that I'm going to know in 10 years. And I didn't hit all the notes, but yeah, just like you said, they remember certain things that you didn't even know that they would remember.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's a
And
really beautiful thing.
we beat ourselves up regularly.
Yeah.
And we think the worst of ourselves as
Yeah.
parents because we're so concerned about being a good parent. And then when we, years later, when we're out of that crazy, time when they're little and they just need you all the time, and you get to step back and they tell you things, that's like what a beautiful experience that is.
That's
And
right.
you just want to say that to like younger moms. Don't
Mm,
worry. Like you're going to get there no matter what. And they're not going to remember every single thing that, they are going to remember some things. Like my son's like, he goes, I remember when you made Wednesdays, Fend for Yourself Wednesday. And I was like, you're right.
why not?
I did because I didn't love cooking, and then when I got divorced I'm like, oh man, I got to cook all the time now. And I did our Wednesday. I was so, it was like the middle of the week. I was just exhausted. So I'm like, if you want cereal for dinner, fend for yourself.
Well,
So,
in the whole world, that's called life skills. Can I hear an
yeah.
amen?
Yes.
That's a common
Yes.
point that you're just learning life skills. But yeah, it's funny how they remember certain things that you're like, oh, I didn't know that you thought of that in that way.
He thinks of it as a positive.
Oh,
He's like,
good.
he goes, yeah. He's like, it actually taught me how to like get food and stuff for myself. And I'm like, good job. I'm so
Right.
glad because I felt bad about it. I felt like I wasn't, mothering or whatever. So,
Yeah, I understand that. I'm definitely in my perimenopausal years. Yeah, I'm good. I don't care. I don't need to cook anymore. I've done it for 25 years. I still do, but I don't have the passion that I had once either. But
Yeah.
when you had asked me on the podcast about what I would say to my 19-year-old self, I'm curious what
Mm.
you would say to your 19-year-old self.
Oh, I think I would tell myself, I would definitely tell myself to hang in there and to not be so hard on
Mm-hmm.
myself. Have a little grace. Have a little grace for yourself. Be kind to yourself. Um, Believe in your self and believe and like really think about what people are saying to you and like measure it against what you know to be true in your own heart. Um, and like when your intuition is telling you something,
Yeah.
trust it. Trust yourself.
That's
So
good.
I think those would be, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, I know that there are a lot of homeschool moms that are in scenarios where life is hard, not because of homeschooling, although sometimes we make it hard because we try to do things like I did, out private school to private school. Um, but hard because life is hard. And there are seasons where you're challenged by a relationship in your home, whether it's with a teen or with a husband or a partner, or somebody passes away, or someone has a chronic illness, or you fill in the blank. Everybody knows
Hmm.
stuff. What would you say to the homeschool mom presently who is going through a tough season?
I think I think I would remind them that they need to have moments for themselves as well.
Mm,
Like you are doing such a you're doing the very best you can and it's good enough.
yeah.
It's good enough. It's more than good enough. You're showing up and that is what matters. But you also have to take time. It's like what they tell you on the airplane. You got to
Mhm,
put your own oxygen mask on before you put your child's on or they're not going to breathe.
mhm.
So you have to take care of yourself. You have to take some time to put your own my dog sometimes to put
It's so
your
cute.
own energies first so that you can continue to take care of everybody else. So
Yeah.
I think that that's a really important thing to remind people. 'Cause
Yes.
we
And
don't
that
think
is,
we don't think we can do that as moms. We
mhm,
think we have to do everything, but
yeah.
it's really important for them to and again give yourself some grace because things are hard. There's hard situations and there's it takes a lot. It's exhausting.
Yeah. Yeah. You know what? Actually, I was on the plane 2 times yesterday, two different planes, and I've never heard this before. This they said there's going to be turbulence, like a lot of turbulence, and whoever is in the safety aisles, the ones that actually have to open the big doors if we
Uh-huh.
crash, actually survive. And so you shouldn't have any cords attached because people might stumble through there when they're going through down the door. And
Hmm.
at the very end, she said, I just want everybody just to remember to be kind to each other and be safe. We will be in their seats in the back, and we will not be available if something happens. And all I remember thinking is, what the heck? What flight of nothing about that felt very safe to me.
No. Yeah, that feels
I was,
scary. And you're like, oh man, what seat did I get? Yeah.
we were we were fine. But
Yeah.
instead of hearing a discussion on oxygen masks and make sure to,
Yeah.
get your oxygen mask on before your kids, I was thinking, what flight did I just get on?
Yeah.
But sometimes it feels like life is that flight
Yes.
where you're like, this is too much. This is too much. And
Yeah.
why I'm here as a life coach is to help women shed what's not working so they can show up in their homeschool mom lives intentionally, confidently, and purposefully. And if there is somebody that is feeling like, yeah, this is the energy of what I'm feeling right now, and you need someone to talk to, that's what I do. So you're welcome to book a conversation with me to learn more about coaching and see if that can be a support for you. But any last thoughts that you'd like to share?
No, just I guess basically just, you got to keep believing in yourself.
Yeah.
Like you have to hold on to those things that you know are true about yourself. And no matter what, like don't second guess that. Like allow that to be what it is. And yeah, just keep going.
Beautiful words spoken from two people who genuinely have been there, done that. And
Hmm.
we know that it's hard.
Yeah.
Sometimes seasons are really, really hard. And also, yeah, just what you said, keep going. Yeah. It's such a pleasure to chat with you again. I can't believe I forgot the Gilmore Girls names. I think I've watched those shows like times.
Yeah, I'll never. I got them seared in my brain. Yep. So
So where do we
big fan.
your podcast? Mind your heart.
Mind your heart. You can find it anywhere you get podcasts. We're on YouTube as well, but also like Apple, Spotify, all the places.
All the places.
So,
Yeah.
yep.
And if you're a homeschool mom and you're interested in learning more about wellness and mindset, you can head over to my podcast as well, the Homeschool Mama Self-Care Podcast. It's always a pleasure chatting with you. And let's do it again soon.
All right. Thank you so
Okay,
much.
talk to you soon.
Bye.
Have a great week, everybody.